Oh gosh, I think I'm live. Here I am. I started the stream too soon. But here we are. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I'm Marshall, and we just ran Pearl Harbor Kriegsspiel yesterday. Let's make sure that everything's working right. It looks like we're good. I should check the YouTube real quick. According to this, though, it says that we're doing just fine. But today I'm going to talk about something that's really, really important to our association and our events and other things. Hang on, I'm just checking everything out. It says it's live. And just all right. It says it's good. All right. All right. So I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about the Pearl Harbor game, and I think I may talk about it a little bit. But this was an interesting event, and we had some interesting occurrences in both the run up to the event and the execution of the event. Um, and it's not just this event, we got a lot going on. I'll show you what the issue is. Let me pull up Discord here. So let's come to Discord and pull up our events page. And if I can drag this over here. All right, so here we have our Discord and we take a look at our events page. I wonder if I can enlarge that. Yeah, I can. So we've got some games here. We've got, 5 folks interested here because it's a pay to play. We got 3 folks interested here, pay to play, of which I happen to be one of them. We've got a stress test game coming up. That's a pretty reasonable number there. We've got Grand Jena Austedt, which is 143 indicated interest. For Pearl Harbor, we had, I think, 54. And one of the problems with these stats, though, is we don't always know what we're actually going to get. Generally speaking, we get far more commitments here than actually show up, and it causes problems for us. So let's talk about this. I don't want to mess with that. All right. In the run up to this event, I engaged a couple of side commanders. They were both excellent persons. And of course, there goes my video. There it is, back again. Had this issue yesterday. Um, in the run up to the event, we had a couple of capable commanders who I personally tapped to run the Japanese and the American side. They put a lot of work in planning and preparation into preparing for the event. And then last week, within hours of each other, they both had to drop out. Let me see here. What did I want to show you? I just want to show you the level of planning that the Japanese, for example, did. I mean, it was pretty substantial. Here it is. That's the final. There's a bunch here, though. But they really went into it. The problem for the commanders is they both had to drop out. Now, they both had good reasons. And I don't want people to think that they cannot live their life, that somehow they are locked into participation in a game just because they've clicked a button or said they'll show up, and then life happens. Because life does happen, right? People have jobs that require them to work. There are family emergencies and other things. But I've noticed that there's a lot of these things that happen on Saturdays during Kriegsspiels. And I'm not disparaging or saying that this is the case with those particular individuals. Knowing those individuals, I'm 100% certain that they had legitimate reasons. But one of the problems that we get into is when you click that interest button, we try to plan to have all those participants there, and then we don't get them. And we end up in a situation where we have way more open slots than we have players. Pearl Harbor was one such event. There are other events and games that do this, and we also lack things like umpire support and other things that we require. And the end result is we have kind of a half baked or three-quarter baked experience where the lead or master umpire has to really scramble to fill slots and make changes on the fly. If we're just doing a generic event, that's pretty easy to do. In order to become a master umpire, one of the things that you have to demonstrate or that we look for in the master umpire certification process is your ability to scale an event up or down based on the actual numbers, regardless of the intended numbers or what people say. Um, but my plea to people is this. First of all, if you do not know whether or not you can make it to an event, do not click the button indicating that you're interested. It's okay to indicate interest in a different way. Let people know, hey, I think I'm going to be there, but there's a chance I might not be. I may have family plans, I may have something else going on, whatever it may be. And that way we can kind of tentatively plan for you to be there without necessarily having to count on you. Show up as a walk-on. It's also okay for people to show up as a walk-on the day of, having not clicked the interest button, saying, hey, I'm interested. Now the risk of that is there might not be a slot available because we might not have prepared to scale the event. But it depends. If it's a historic event, we tend to be kind of stuck with the historic order of battle. If it's a pre-planned event where there's a lot of depth of planning, we're kind of stuck with what we got. On the other hand, if it is one of those generic kind of just general open Saturday, we can generally be a little more flexible with that. But if you do click that button, climb mountains and do what you have to do to get there, to be part of that event, especially if you say, hey, I want to umpire, because when you bail out, it creates problems for the umpire and it can harm the experience overall for everyone. Now, we know that there are going to be a certain number of people who have a legitimate reason. They get called to work, they have a family emergency. I've mentioned this already. We account for that in our planning and preparations. But if you have an overplus of people who suddenly, hey, it's Saturday and it's good weather out and you decide I'd rather touch grass than play a game, that's fine. It's totally within your rights. But if you've committed to participate and then you back out at the last minute, we end up in a situation where the game can be impacted by your lack of participation. So think about these things before you click that button. Let's talk about what is happening now on sort of the supply side that could be driving these issues. One of the problems that we've had in the IKS is a substantial commitment to things like running a game every single open Saturday and stuff like that. And what we've kind of figured is that over time, the quality and the participation levels in our open Saturday events has kind of gone down. And so what's happening there is we think we're going to the well too often. And we've had some mixed quality events over the past year, of which I've also contributed to. And a result of that is the participation numbers decline. Over the summer, we put out a video. We got a big pulse of interest. We had maybe 1,000 people join. And then over time, you kind of go back down to that equilibrium point. And so we kind of upscaled and we took advantage, but now the interest is waning. We have Grand Jena Auschwitz coming, which will hopefully inspire some interest. But at the same time, we also have the holiday season right now, which has a depressive effect on participation numbers. So one of the things that we've explored is the possibility of cutting back the open Saturdays. Maybe only doing it a couple times, or maybe only doing it under master umpires who've gone through a whole process and said, this is the event I want to run, and so on. But again, it gets back to the demand side where the players have to keep their commitments, because if we put an event together, and we do a lot of work because, like in this particular event, I worked for hours. I was up at 4 a.m. working on this particular event, putting all this information and all these other things in. And this was just the morning of, not to mention the stuff that was done in the weeks prior, and not to mention the stuff such as the positioning of all these ships. Like I went through and named all these ships, but then I handed this off to the American umpire, or player, I should say, who then positioned all of these ships. And so there was a lot of work that went into planning and preparing this. But then, of course, we had, weak participation. And what do you do then? Uh, let's critique this particular event, of course. There were some issues with this particular event that don't necessarily help. Pearl Harbor, in and of itself, was selected just because of the date, December 7th. So I wanted to run an event that coincided with the historic anniversary. The problem with the historic scenario is that it's very, very one sided. Obviously, it's a surprise attack from the Japanese on the Americans. And anybody who plays Americans is going to have a pretty short, brutal game because the Japanese are just there to curb stomp you and you're just there to be a punching bag or a target. So big kudos, big hats off to the people who participated as Americans. And they did have a little bit of fun. There were some things that they were able to do, but for the most part, there wasn't a whole lot. On the other hand, for the Japanese, because this is an air-based scenario, the velocity of the units and the units being kind of a one-shot use, we had guys whose entire turn was a single turn. I had one guy came in, hit these tanks here, and then left. And that was his game. You're done. I kind of expected that. And I think the players also knew and expected that. But in actual practice, it was a little shocking to see how quickly some of the players fulfilled their missions. Other players had a little bit more fun. The guys running the fighters were there for a little longer. They had more choices to make and so on. The game itself, I think, was done in 3 or 4 hours tops. And then that was kind of it. But it was, again, a surprise attack scenario with it's an airstrike. So you run the airstrike and it's game over. What I learned from this particular scenario, and it's important to have good scenarios that are satisfying in order to get those people to keep coming back for games. If we put on games that are unsatisfying, people are not going to want to come back and play. They're not going to click the interest button. They're not even going to show up as a walk-on. And so that's one of the things that we have to kind of look at and critique in the aftermath of these things. And this is an event that I would not repeat. Again, it was an experimental event. It was an experimental game. I was pretty upfront with most people prior to that. Even on the live stream, I'm like, look, this is going to be kind of this rough kind of thing because we're trying something. And that's just one of the things that I do. I like to experiment and try things. So my events tend to be a little more loosey-goosey and dicey and whatever. I don't know how you want to describe it. Sometimes they're very successful, but at other times they're disasters. This was not, I don't think, it certainly wasn't a disaster. It was successful for what it was. But again, when you have a player who says, I want to play, and the bulk of their participation is this, I don't know that that inspires future participation on behalf of that player. So what do I do to correct that? And I think there are some things that I could have done. One of the things was instead of having this massive order of battle that we had, which was the historic order of battle, cut that thing in half and then have players do first wave, second wave, and just require first and second wave participation. In fact, I think there were 3 waves that were anticipated, but historically, and What ended up happening was the Japanese commander said, we're just going to do 2 waves, but we're going to put everything into the first and second waves, especially the first wave. And that was a very wise tactical decision for the game. However, uh, I should have said to that player, hey, uh, you're going to have 2 rolls during this event. So the first roll is going to be from 8 to 8:15 turn, and then at 8:30 to 8:45 turn or whatever it is. You're going to come on in 2 waves, and that way their day is better spent, and they get to make more choices. I did justify it to both myself and the players, saying that when you are in any kind of a combat situation, whether real life or not, the number of choices that you actually get to make, especially the higher the level that you're at, dramatically go down the higher you go up the chain of command. Um, and that's true, but again, I don't know how fun that is. And because we are doing these events for fun, it's really important, if we want people to come back and we want those numbers to be high, that we have fun events. At the same time, we have to experiment. We have to try things like this particular event if we want to keep experiences fresh and new and different, and keep people coming back after many months. There's only so many Napoleonic Saturdays or American Civil War play by posts that you are going to do before you're like, okay, let's go find something else. Let's go play golf or take up fishing or play a different game altogether. So you have to experiment. Unfortunately, the experimentation process often requires a lot of mistakes. And there's not a lot of umpires out there, or including master umpires, that are probably willing to experiment, make mistakes, come on a live podcast and admit their mistakes and talk about the lessons that they've learned. So I do it. It's kind of a service I provide, although half the time unwittingly. But I think that's an important thing to developing the hobby. And the people who participate, yes, they're guinea pigs, but their sacrifice is greatly appreciated. Because what we've learned, for example, from Pearl Harbor game is there are some challenges, there are some problems with running an airstrike, especially when it's a surprise attack event. But there are also ways that we can make it better and not repeat the problem for future iterations. Well, there goes my monitor once again. Let's see here. Let's fix that. And let's fix this. So not only do we have to fix the Kriegsspiel, we also have to fix the technology. We have to fix the computer. If you folks are concerned, don't be. I have a computer that's in the shop. This is an old computer I'm running on. And the one in the shop is coming back in the next few days. And here we are. Okay. So that's what I've got in terms of kind of a self-reflection and a critique. But I really want to encourage people to keep your commitments. When you sign up and say, hey, I'm going to be there, be there. So that way, if a person does have a legitimate reason to not be there, they can not be there, not feel guilty, and the event can more or less go off as planned. Whereas if people are being very non-committal, very flippant, or what I would say even flaky about their participation, that hurts us as a whole. That impacts us. So we have talked about even charging fees that would be refundable or whatever. We've talked about keeping track of people who commonly flake out on events, because a lot of times it's the same people over and over. And we have identified certain individuals who drop out mid-game or other things. But at the same time, we don't want to get negative. We don't want to get heavy or harsh or push people away from participating. Even I have had some issues with certain events. Like last week, I think I resigned from a play-by post simply because I I could not keep up with it. I joined in the middle of the play by post. I tried for a couple months to get into it and get my head around everything. I couldn't keep up. So at the end result of that, I think I was bringing down the team rather than helping. So I offered to resign and then just let that be. Had my superior in that particular game said, no, no, stick around, we'll remediate and fix the situation, I was prepared to stay on. But that didn't happen, and that's okay. You know, not every game is going to work out for the players either. But at the same time, those choices, those decisions, the decision to prune back one or another, have to be made very judiciously. So there are times and incidents where you got to say, I clicked the interest button, I signed up, but I can't make it, or I can't fully commit to it, or there's something going on. But again, keep those to an absolute minimum so that your credibility, or sort of your Kriegsspiel credit score, if you will, stays high. Whereas if you are constantly or consistently not making it to events, don't click that interest button. Don't give us a +1 in the tally so that we say, okay, we need another command slot, or we need to recruit another assistant umpire to cover these other command slots, when we don't really have that need, when that demand really isn't there. So that's my advice. All right, let's just see here. I don't know if I can see. I don't think I see any kind of commentary on the YouTube. Not that it comes in. It's supposed to come in here on OBS. It's supposed to be integrated, but it's not. Feel free to discuss this on the Discord. Feel free to discuss it in the YouTube. I could be completely off base. You're totally free to come at me and critique me and say, this is ridiculous, whatever. All of these things, especially as long as they are respectfully placed, are then analyzed and kind of used to improve what we do and how we operate. And again, that's why we're talking about the Pearl Harbor event in particular. We're talking about personal experiences umpiring, and we're talking about personal failings or shortcomings and other things. All of that's okay, and because you're allowed to be human, and no game is perfect, and nothing is perfect out there. But again, by kind of talking about these issues and being self-reflective and being honest with oneself, then we can get to a point where we can arrive at proposed solutions that are workable, that improve things for all of us. And again, don't click the interest button if you're not sure you can make it. It's okay to say, hey, I think I can make it, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm a tentative commitment. And then when you put together or run an event, if it's an experimental event like I did, you've got to be upfront with people and shape their expectations. And when you do run an experimental event, it needs to be something where the person is going to have more than one or two turns, or more than just one or two very simple decisions to make. And they're actually going to be involved enough that it is worth their time. If any of these things don't happen, whether on the supply side or the demand side, the umpire side or the player side, whenever any of this stuff goes wrong, it brings down the level and the quality for everybody. And when that happens, it's time to self-reflect and self-correct. So that's what we're doing here. So I want to thank you all for checking out the podcast. I do see that there's a comment, but I can't read it. Unfortunately, I guess I can pull up the YouTube real quick before I call this for the day. So let's pull it up, because I do want to respond to the things that people say in the live show. View the channel. Here we are. Oh, you'll probably notice that I put up bacon and eggs, and that's because of my commitment analogy. When I had breakfast this morning, there's a difference between involvement and commitment. When I had breakfast this morning, the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. And that's what we're looking for. Let's see here. All right, John let me know that I'm loud and clear, which I appreciate. Grim Harbinger says, had to drop out of Hohenlinden because I was passing out at the time since I had not slept in 24 hours. You need to do what I did a couple of years back and just fall asleep during the middle of the game so that they come to you for your orders and they can hear you snoring on camera. That's what you got to do. And then Grim says, how dare you call me a guinea pig? Well, if I'm running the event, the chances of you being a guinea pig are better than 50-50. All right. Well, I want to thank you all again for being here. I'm not going to carry on too long. Hopefully, my commentary provides food for thought and food for commentary, again, here on the YouTube or just in the Discord. And we draw lessons and experiences from that improves things for everyone. Thank you very much for being here. That's all I got for now, and we will see you on our next adventure.